2005, Leanne Hester was the first female to receive a Silver Star for her direct engagement with the enemy. How many of you recognize Carl K. Connect? Right. So he was the cartoonist for the Evansville Courier, and I know everybody in this room remembers that there were two newspapers in Evansville back then, right? The Courier in the morning and the Press in the evening. So Carl is the cartoonist for the Evansville Courier from 1906 to when he retired in June of 1960. He produced over 18,000 cartoons. And during World War II, they all had a theme. World War II, and a lot of them, the themes were around women and children, encouraging them to sign up for military service or to sign up as volunteers. We have an original Carl K. Connect cartoon in the hallway that you passed coming in here. The theme was, instead of sitting around playing cards or just chit-chatting with your girlfriends, volunteer to help out in Evansville during the war. And a couple of days after that cartoon appeared in the newspaper, the head of the Red Cross called Carl K. Connect and he said, "We just want to thank you. Our phones have been ringing off the hook ever since that cartoon showed up." Another thing about Carl, some of you may not know, is that he was one of the founders of the Mesca Park Zoo, and the first elephant at the zoo was named after him, Kay the elephant. And so in a lot of his cartoons, you'll see his signature, there's going to be a little elephant by his signatures. You can see 3 of the 4 that we have on the wall in the Humboldt Gallery. You'll see the little elephant by his signature. So here's some examples of women who were part of women accepted for voluntary emergency service. They were called WWII. And I think that photo in the top right appeared in the Evansville Courier is hysterical. Waves from waves on Ohio's waves. And of course, nurses played a key role in both World War I and in all the wars. They're going out there. In fact, they recruited women from all the cities in the United States in World War I to help out there, but they didn't really prepare them for what they were going to experience. And a lot of them came back with what we call post-traumatic stress. Back then, I think it was called shell shock. So a lot of them were emotionally in bad places when they came back. And then there are the WASPs. These are the women in the Army, the Women Air Force Service Pilots. So these are the women, 1,000 of them trained to fly planes. Now, some of them, the original ones that signed up, were pilots before the war. But most of them were trained to fly planes. Their job was to fly these planes out of cities like Evansville, where they were being produced. You know, right across the street, we've got public aviation, spitting out 10, 12 planes a day. They had to be flown out of the city to the coast. And that was the job of these pilots, to go all the cities in the United States where factories were producing these planes. And some of them, if they could, would fly across the oceans. They wouldn't allow the women to do that. They were only allowed to fly to the coast. The P-47s were shipped across. They would take the wings off, put them on the upper deck of the big ships, and sail them over there. Now, the ladies around the side, the top left photo is the iconic photo that you see anytime somebody mentions a ferry ride. But you may not know some of the women that were part of this force. The lower left is Helen Ritchie. She was the first female pilot of an Air Force before the war. For some reason, she couldn't get on an Air Force, or she couldn't get a job after the war. And about 10, 15 years later, she actually committed suicide. But she was one of the first to sign up as part of the ferry pilots. The upper right hand is Barbara Erickson, BJ is what she was called, and she was the first female pilot to fly into Evansville. And that's her getting in a P-47 in front of the Republic. That photo appeared in the Courier. The two on the lower right hand were big name women in the WASP force. Teresa James on the left, Betty Gillies on the right. Betty Gillies was actually 5'2", so she had wooden blocks put on the pedals in her plane so her foot could reach it. That's how she flew the planes. But Teresa James' uniform uniform is actually at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. So these women actually won a lot of awards. These women risked their lives, and these women were also another example of people who played a key role in the Air Force, but were never considered part of the Air Force. And when that war ended, they were sent home without benefits, without anything. And it wasn't until the past 15, 20 years, Congress finally approved a bill that allows these women to be buried in Arlington Cemetery. Okay, what about work? Now this is where we've heard the most about women, right? Rosie the Riveter. 200,000 companies successfully converted their factories over for defense contracts. We have a ton of examples here in the city of Evansville. We probably have 80 factories doing work on defense contracts, producing over 300 different items for the war effort. Because of heavy competition, remember a lot of materials were being rationed during the war, so they weren't in plentiful supply. The factories that had defense contracts got first crack with all of this. So if you didn't have a contract, you struggled, and there were 300,000 fewer factories at the end of the war than there were before the war. This is the poster that appeared, the photo that appeared on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post done by Norman Rockwell. So that's one of the famous photos of a Rosie the Riveter. In the 6 months after Pearl Harbor, 750,000 women applied for jobs in these factories, but only 80,000 were taken on. That didn't last long, right? The owners of these factories learned in a hurry that they were going to have to take these women, and they had to take women, they had to take teenagers, and they took handicapped folks because the manpower just wasn't there. They were all fighting the war. Now, there could have been even more women on these jobs, but there was a lot of things, deterrents that prevented it. One of them was basic myths. One of them that I read about recently was called riveter ovaries. Shaking of the ovaries while you're riveting. I don't know. Some of these women believed that they would get sick working in these factories, that some of the chemicals would be bad for them. Some of them thought the chemicals could cause them to get pregnant. You can't believe some of the myths that were going around, and it prevented them from going into these jobs. Another reason, the wages were still 40% less than what a man was making for the same job. Factory jobs added to their burdens at home. And when one woman was asked why more women didn't work in these factories, she snapped, because they don't have wives. Here's some examples of riveters here locally in the Republic Aviation plant. And you can see them working on the shelves and the body of the plane. By the way, that poster on the top left is another iconic poster seen whenever you hear about a Rosie the Riveter and how women can do it. Believe it or not, this poster only hung for 2 weeks in a Westinghouse factory during the war. It wasn't until after the war that it started to be used to represent women who worked in the war. On the lower right-hand side, those are identical twin sisters that drove up to Cervelle from Kentucky. And their names were Renetta and Janetta Sutherland. And they worked at the wing plant. Now this is an example of a pair of riveters. They generally worked in pairs. On the one side, on the right, she's the one with the rivet gun. And her sister is bucking that rivet on the other side. Did you know that Marilyn Monroe was a Rosie? Her first husband, James Doherty, was fighting overseas, and at age 19, she was working in a radio plane munitions factory. And that's how she was discovered, because a photographer was in the factory taking publicity photos, and he took pictures of her, and that's how she got a job as a model, which of course led to a film. Now here's a look at some ladies that were working on parts that would go into the P-47. So you've got the women working on the guns in the upper left corner and the lower right corner. They were called gun moms. And they would actually put their names right here on the butts of those guns before they were installed in the plane. Now you can see from the front of that plane, the B-47 Legion Spirit 2 over there, there are 4 guns on each wing. These are 50 caliber Browning machine guns. And these are the ladies that worked on them. In the upper right-hand corner, you see the women working on the calibers that went on the plane. Now, in that model that you see over here, that is what the earlier version of the P-47 cockpit looked like. That's called the Razorback cockpit. And the pilots called it the greenhouse because it does kind of look like a greenhouse. But there's a problem with this cockpit. So you may know what it was. Why didn't the pilots like that cockpit? You can't see behind you. Nothing but metal behind their heads. And you need to be able to see all the way around. And that's why they came out with the bubble top canopies. So now the pilot has vision all the way around. Then, of course, there were the welders over at the Evansville shipyard on the west side of town. Lady number 11 is Deborah Cox. She's the first female welder at the shipyard. The lady in the middle, a photo appeared in the newspaper. She was called Queen of the Welders. Unfortunately, I don't have the rest of the article, so I don't know why she was the Queen of the Welders. The other lady is Emma Monroe, and she's the first woman that was certified to weld in 3 positions. In front as if on a table, up and down as if on a wall, and overhead as if from like a ceiling. The photo in the lower right was a local welding class. So these are women being trained to weld at the shipyard. Yeah, I mentioned her. She's the queen. That's the one that was considered queen of the welders, but I don't know why.
Oh, okay.
These ladies worked at Chrysler. Chrysler probably had one of the highest percentages of women and minorities working at their plant. You can see on the upper right, those women are sorting bullets. Now, I was showing this photo to a friend of mine. Some of you may know Holly Bezzo. Her husband Bob worked at Bristol Myers. And I was showing that to her, and she said, Donna, that is my mother in the black dress on the left side of the photo. And she said she hated that dress. Now, let me tell you, why do you think she hated that dress? This is before air conditioning. So it was hot. And you notice most of the other ladies in that photo were wearing light-colored clothing because it was hot in these factories. A lot of the buildings, if anybody recalls seeing the Chrysler building on the north side back behind the Old North High School used to be, the roof line is elevated. And they had windows up there that could be open so that ventilation could go through and help to cool off the folks inside. The ladies on the left are packing the bullets in those little cardboard boxes, and I've always wondered how they got those bullets perfectly aligned in those little boxes by hand. And then I read recently that they had a wooden mold. So the bullets were put in a mold and then dropped into those boxes. Look at that table. It goes all the way up to the end of the photo, and there are women both sides. These women are packing millions of bullets a day. They produce 3.25 billion 45 caliber bullets at Chrysler at the beginning of the war. Now, lower left, these are the women who were inspecting tanks, or they were looking at tanks. Well, that photo wasn't taken in Evansville, but they did refurbish Sherman tanks at Chrysler after they worked on the bullets. Of course, there were women working in the offices as well. We can't forget them. These photos are of women that were at the shipyard. In the upper left, you see the little red arrow? Right there? That's pointing to my grandmother. My grandmother worked in the office. In fact, if you'll look at the shipyard display in our home front gallery, you will see there's a little directory of office people sitting on one of the glass shelves. And I looked through it and I found her name. She worked for the plant manager at the factory. And my grandfathers, both my grandfathers, one worked at Chrysler and the other one worked at Republic. So 3 out of the 4 had a stake in the war. In fact, I don't actually mention child care maybe later on, but because both my grandparents worked in one of the factories, my mother and her brother and sister were sent to live with their grandmother in Mount Carmel, Illinois. Remember, child that wasn't an issue before the war. But now that women are working, it suddenly became a problem. And that was the way my grandparents handled it, was to have them stay so that they could work the long hours in those factories. Absenteeism was a problem for both men and women. It was as high as 20%. Sometimes they would send celebrities to these factories to encourage, or to the cities, to encourage people that we need you to be on that job so that we can get these materials off to the war. And sometimes loyalty played a key role, because if you had an uncle, brother, father, grandfather fighting in the war, you wanted them to come back alive, and in order to do that, they needed supplies. And this is apparently a true story. Actually, that's on the next slide. That's the next slide. Andrew Jackson Higgins, who created the Higgins vote, and for those of you from Mount Vernon, not the same person, Jackson Higgins was also a mayor of Mount Vernon for the 70s and 80s. But this guy lived in New Orleans, and he created the Higgins vote, which is what you see over there on Rolls-Royce from LSD 325. But anyway, he had posters of Hirohito, Mussolini, and Hitler in the bathroom with a sign that basically said, "Come on in, take it easy every minute. Mulo helps us plan." Here's that story I was talking about. Elgin Staples, his ship went down at Wartime, and he went over the side, but he survived because of a safety belt that upon later examination showed that it had been inspected and approved by his mother.
Oh my God.
In Akron, Ohio. Anybody recognize this photo? It comes from a movie. The reason I love this photo is, if you've not noticed already, I'm a big fan of posters from World War II. So that's what I got all over my stuff. I just remember, this is before television, before the internet, before cell phones. So basically, people are dependent on information from either phone or newspapers. So this is how they got the word out, these posters. And they're so colorful and big and beautiful that I just love to collect. But anyway, where does this come from? You might recognize the movie. Exactly. A League of Their Own. This just happened to be in the back as I was looking at the movie, but it's Find Your Job. And this woman is saying, I found a job where I do best. Teenagers were working in these factories. You could be 14 and get a job in one of these factories. You just had to have permission from your parents and the principal of your high school. You would go to work during the day, go to high school during the day, and then work in the factory at night. What is their motivation? Money. Right. They're providing for their families. They may have a father or somebody that used to live with them who's all fighting the war, so here's a way to bring money home. I have talked with a riveter here locally who remembers having a teenager as her riveting partner in one of the factories who worked with her in the evenings. Minorities were getting jobs that they were never allowed to work at before the war. So you can see the photos in the top middle. The top middle is from Chrysler. The lower middle is a lady in a wheelchair, so handicapped people are getting opportunities and jobs that would have been difficult before. And in the photo on the lower right, this lady here, anybody know what her handicap is? She's blind. So she's using her fingers to inspect for burrs on a bomb shell. Now, women and children were doing a lot in the homes as well. So knitting, crocheting is a big thing during World War II because they're knitting items for the soldiers, blankets, socks, you name it. Harold Morgan told me that he used to crochet squares and bring them into the school. He enjoyed that. I'll talk a little bit later about something he did not enjoy doing. That by Grace Eleanor Roosevelt. This is one of my favorite posters. Remember Pearl Harbor? Pearl Harbor. Isn't that cute?
Oh, that's nice.
Savings bonds. Constantly throughout the war, there are bond drives to raise funds to pay for what's being produced here on the home front. The city of Evansville purchased $125 million in defense bonds. In today's dollars, that's over $2 billion. And these are on folks who are working probably on an average of around $1 an hour. Henderson County sold over $16 million. This is a pay stub from Cervelle. So this person is earning about, what is that, $68, almost $69. Look how much was going directly into savings fund. Almost a third of his salary. Schools collected money for savings bonds. In the Evansville-Vanderburgh School Corporation purchased $1.25 million in war bonds. Now, half of that came from the adults in the schools, but the other half came from the kids. In fact, in the lower left, those are Central High School students. They collected $70,000 in war bond sales and were allowed to go over to Republic Aviation to choose the plane that they wanted to purchase with those bonds, and it was called, wait for it, the Golden Bear. That's a poster from Wrights High School. And it actually had 90% participation from the kids. So they would go to school once a week and buy the stamps, 10 cents, 15 cents for the stamps, until they had enough for a book that would give them the actual bond. Community service was a big key thing during World War II. The Red Cross canteen was staffed by volunteers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was open 3.5 years, and during that time, 1.6 million soldiers were served, regardless of their race. Very unusual in the city of Evansville in World War II because this city was highly segregated back then. A lot of places here in Evansville you wouldn't see that. Spaghetti Factory is another example of business that would serve anyone, and the Spaghetti Factory and Red Cross Canteen did not charge for their meals for the soldiers. The upper right-hand corner is inside the USO. USO was actually segregated. So there's a separate building for African Americans, and the one for everyone else is downtown where the Civic Center is today. The lower right-hand, those are employees from one of the factories taking a bus down to Camp Breckenridge for a dance that was down. Victory Gardens. Remember, a lot of rationing going on, so you didn't have access to a lot of the food supplies, meat, sugar, things like that. So rationing is a key thing during World War II. What you're seeing here are posters and examples of folks who are growing gardens. And you can see that all across the United States. Here's examples of posters encouraging folks to save. One on the middle was gas. So even if you had a car, and you couldn't buy a new car in World War II because all the factories turned their factories over to the production of military equipment, like Jeeps and trucks and things like that. So you couldn't buy a new car. But if you had a car and the tires were worn down, you probably couldn't replace those tires. Even the school buses struggled to keep their tires in place. This one, fats. This is what I was going to tell you about Harold. He said once a week I had to have a jar full of grease to take into school. And he said that grease would get all over me. I hated it. He said they didn't have the containers like we have today. But that gas was used in the production of explosives, TNT, the glucose in the fat. Paper was said. Anybody recognize, where was this photo taken? You recognize the building in the back? Yeah, the old post office in downtown Evansville. Big scrap heap right next to it. And these are kids, photos of kids collecting scrap metal. A lot of the railroad tracks, trolley tracks, World War I, Civil War cannons, all melted down so that they could use that in the production for the military. These guys on the little right-hand corner from Wrights High School, out in fields picking milkweed pods. What is the milkweed used for? Yeah, life preservers. Because the material normally used came from K-pop trees controlled by the Empire of Japan. So we didn't have access to it, and they used a milkweed pot. Kids were doing a lot of stuff in the schools. In these photos, you can see them making wrapping paper for the Red Cross, making service flags, learning how to cook so they can help out at home. In the upper left, that is a woodworking class at one of the high schools. They were making planes that were used to train soldiers on how to identify planes. In the middle, they're putting together Red Cross supplies. So a lot of work being done in the schools, in all of the schools. Now I mentioned child care earlier, so here's a new concept. Now a lot of the factories, the schools, churches had child care, but back then, women didn't want to leave their kids with strangers. Not an issue today. Take them. But back then it's a problem. So in many cases, they bring relatives in from out of town to stay with live with them during the war to watch their kids while they went off to war, or like my grandparents did, have them live with their grandmother. So then the war ends, and what happens to these women and children? Well, for the children, they went back to being kids again, because there was a lot of pressure on them during the war to help out and do what they could. The women, they really liked those jobs in the factories, but the majority of them were sent home so that the men coming back from the war could get those jobs. But it didn't take long as time went forward. As time went by, 75% of women reported they wanted to continue working in the factories, but they were given the pay slips anyway. Almost 40% of the workforce during the war was made up by women. By 1950, that number was back up again to around 32%. So as we know, over time, women came back and started working in a lot of those jobs. So World War II solidified the notion that women were in the workforce to stay. This is just the mission of the museum. We want to preserve this story and the story about the folks here locally who fought during the war, World War II. We're getting ready to add a Korea exhibit, and we'll do Vietnam, as time goes by. And the home front will open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 12 to 4. General admission is 11. So tell your families how to come by and see us. Questions? Yes.
I was curious when you said you had high school kids, working, and how the differentiation of pay between a man and a woman for a job. If it was a high school boy, wonder what his pay was.
I don't know the answer. She wanted to know if the boys from high school, if their pay was different from the women. And that I'm not sure of. I don't know the answer to that. I have some hands over here. But, yes. Yeah, I think probably weighed between 5 and 10 pounds. They were fairly heavy, but I think as time went by, we probably got used to it. It became a habit to them. She was talking about how heavy the rivet guns were. That it had to be hard for them to hold those for a long period, especially if you're riveting up, or that way. I'm sure it will for that. Yeah. What else?
How many people in here had relatives that were working in the Wartime?
I didn't ask how many of you had a relative that worked in one of these factories. A lot. Any other questions?
The name of the girl that was named Deborah, you said nobody heard of? You at the beginning, you said.
Oh, Deborah Sampson.
Samson.
Yes, Deborah Sampson.
Not from Evansville, right?
No. I don't think Evansville had too many people here at the time. Late 1700s.
Oh, okay, I see.
That was a revolutionary war. Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else? Yes. 6,242 P-47 Thunderbolts made here in Evansville. 167 LSTs. There were 1,051 LSTs made across the nation. 19 shipyards, 5 in the Midwest. The 5 in the Midwest made around 570, I believe they were called cornfield shipyards just because we were in the Midwest. But Evansville at 167 produced more than any of those other shipyards. Yes. Yes. Both. Yeah, both pros.
Donna?
Yes.
Why was Evansville picked
For what?
as a place to build the plants? Why was this?
Well, Evansville's an ideal spot.
Repeat your question.
Yeah. Why is Evansville an ideal spot for a defense factory, whether it's planes or ships or anything? River is a great example. What else? Trains, a lot of train activity happening during the war. What else?
People.
Yeah, high unemployment, skilled workers. What's one of the biggest points? Yeah, we're located in the center of the United States. How hard would it be for a Japanese or a German pilot to get this far inland? Really hard. So a lot of advantages to this city for a defense factory.
Did we hear that we were on the hit list at some point?
We've heard that.
Repeat your question.
We've heard rumors that Evansville was on Hitler's list of towns he wanted to destroy. This was the only city in the nation producing planes, ships, and ammunition, all in the same city. I have looked that up online, and I don't see Evansville in the top 10, but I'm sure he was aware of it. It just would have been, unless he destroyed Europe, there was no way he's getting to the United States. Yes. Yeah, that's what I heard too, but I haven't seen that particular list. He said we were 8 on the list. A lot of the stuff that I talked about today and more is in the book that I wrote, Home Front Heroes, How Women and Children Helped Win World War II, and it's available for sale after this for $40. Any other questions? I think Mark is correct. Yes.
We might have 8 for this.
Yeah.
Say it again.
She said we might have been 8th for Hitler, but he was number 1 for us. He didn't hurt either. In fact, one of the planes produced here in Evansville, I believe it was 1000, was called the Tojo Special for the head of the Japanese Imperial Army.
And Donna, did you give the history of this actual plane?
No, I didn't, but I can real quick. This plane was produced at the end of 1944. It went into the military in May of 1945, which is close to the end of the war, so it didn't actually, it was never taken over to Europe during the war. It was a trainer plane here in the United States for 2 years. When it was sold to the Venezuela Air Force, it was down there for over 20 years, I think 28 years. A private collector purchased it in France, so it was over there for about 7, 8, 10 years. A private collector in Louisville bought it after that, and he completely refurbished the plane and named it after a P-47 that was in World War II called Big Ass Bird 2. Now, they had some problems in the South with bookings because of the name of the plane. So he changed it to what? What was it called when it flew in here? Tar Heel House. That was after another plane in World War II. So it eventually went down to the Lone Star Museum in Texas, and that's where we purchased it and brought it back to Evansville. And we rechristened this plane Hoosier Spirit. The first plane produced in Evansville was called Hoosier Spirit. So that represents the first plane. Hoosier Spirit 2 represents one of the last planes made here in Evansville. It is now the official plane for the state of Indiana. We need your help in keeping this plane here. It costs over $3 million. We had to take out a bank loan that we still owe about $1.7, $1.8 million. And that interest is due every month. So we're about to start a lot of new campaigns. Anything you can do to help us pay off this plane to preserve what your relatives and your parents and your grandparents did to produce Let's keep it back here in Evansville so that we can tell succeeding generations, kids, the story of what happened here during the war. Mark.
Thanks to Don.
Okay, now, several of the things, this thing keep working. What I want to do at this point is, SWIRCA wanted us to have this a little bit of exchange. What we had was a monologue, me and Don. We want a little bit more dialogue, like a question and answer session. So I'll come next to you and we will camera this. My team will camera. So if you have a story about your mom or dad or an aunt or uncle, you got to do it in less than a minute. You can't go on for an hour. But a little bit of talk about what they did, your memories. You are as crucial as our talking, and all of you have some memories. So we're going to work our way around. I'll repeat the question to you. This guy with the American hat on is named Willie. And Willie, we only have 5,000 books on the floor here. And Willie only gave us 1,000 of them, or 1,200, okay? We're going to have a very good library set up here that hopefully you can come peruse sometime. It's better than any library in town because all the donations people give. We have a collections committee. Right now we have about 6,500 items of things that have been in people's garages. And we have a collection committee that meets on once a month. So on Saturday you can bring things in, but we want the story, not just the item, the story that's relevant. Love to have any items, don't throw anything away. If we want to keep it, we'll tell you. We have to give it back to you, we can't use it, we'll tell you. We don't need a lot of World War II uniforms, a lot of uniforms right now. Other uniforms for other countries and other wars, we may need some of those, but uniforms are a little heavy on those right now. This is a donation form. We have them out here, and this is what it says in P47. What Donnie just brought up was we are 1.7 in debt. You just saw in the newspaper the LST just took off for 3 different cities, and it's very unique. It's the only functioning LST left in the world. Now, we have lots of these planes left, lots, maybe at the most 14 left that are flying, but we have one that was made here. There was one in Farmingdale, New York, and the only other plane except for Curtis, and neither one of them, neither one of those factories have a plane now. We have the only ones made in our town. This is crucial. So this is a donation form. If you just give us $5, it's fine. You want to give us more, we fill one out and give it to us today. We've got these signs in the simulator room, but tell your friends and family. We need to make this just like Evansville made the LST. Because another 20, 30 years from now, if we don't make this happen now, it's not going to happen. So now you've had time to think of some things. We're only going to go for a little bit, and then we're going to let you go. The temperature's been nice to us today. It's 11:53. We're going to go for exactly 21 minutes, and then we're going to stop. So I'm working my way around, and you raise your hand if you have a little bit of story. And if you don't have a story, make one up. I know you're bashful because you all went to Central High School. If you went to White, you wouldn't be bashful.
Hey, he's back behind.
Okay, we've got one here. Stand up. Stand up. Front and center here. I want your name.
My name's Doug Long, and I have 4 uncles serving.
Wait a minute. You gotta get this microphone. Okay.
My name is Doug Long, and I have 4 uncles served in the military in World War II. 3 in the Army and 1 in the Navy. And I do have some things I'd like to talk to you folks about. I have samples of VE nail, cigarette squat rack from World War II. I've got some items that you might be interested in.
Can you hear over there? Okay, keep going.
My uncles did not like to talk about the war. And most of what I heard came after one of them died, or my mother died, then they started talking to me. One of my uncles was the hunt during World War II, one was on the sub, and 2 of them were at the Normandy invasion. So, learned a lot.
Oh. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, you got one guy, one guy, you went to right. Okay. Here, front center. Somebody else. Oh, right, we got a good lady, Stand up. Front center, turn around, the camera's over here. Okay, no, I'm gonna give you the microphone. Relax. I'm not touching you, but I gotta get it on you. Campbell.
My father in India.
Can you hear it? Go.
My father fueled the planes that flew the hump.
What she said was, my father fueled the planes that flew the hump. That means fueled them in India and went over to China. Unless he flew them in China, he might have fueled them up over there. In fact, we have a hump display. Mr. Breaker and Mr. Carson flew the hump from Evansville. A lot of other people probably involved in it. A guy named Levine, Mr. Levine, did the radials on the hump, and he's only 99. He lives out on, I don't know, on the east side somewhere. Okay, thank you. What's your name?
Carol.
Carol who?
Hancock.
Carol Hancock. Thank you, Carol. Okay, somebody else here. Lady. Stand up. Sorry, I didn't know. All right, all right,
I
go
just
ahead.
have just a little tidbit.
Tell your name.
Linda Jacobs.
Okay.
I have a little tidbit that I find interesting. My dad was brought down from Du Bois County several times to be enlisted into the World War II, but they never accepted him because he had high blood pressure. So I guess in that time, maybe they just didn't have medicine card.
Yeah, I'm a doctor, but I will talk about that, but not good medicine at that time. We actually just got antibiotics, and it's still about 40 months. So a lot of breakthroughs happened in World War II. But a lot of farmers couldn't get in, and if you had a medical problem, they would disable you. Because if you have a medical problem out in the field, I was only in the military 24 years. If you have a dental problem in the field, all of a sudden, you could paralyze your whole troop of 20 people. 4 of them got to take it back or something else. So you don't want anybody that's not functional out in the military. So I see somebody over here. Right. Yeah, okay. This is Mr. Evansville, and he has a bunch of siblings. Okay, right? He's got a brother that's a master chief. Nope, I'll do it. I'll do it. Move back. Okay, go on, go on. Tell me who you are.
Robert F. Aaron, from Posey County. My dad served in the military during World War II. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge. My mom grew up in France, and she also worked with our military, and they wrote a dad never met her over there. He met her at the airport here in he talked to her by mail. It's a long story. But anyways, I'm proud of my family. I don't know my great-uncle, my uncles and aunts or any of them. I don't know if they worked. The junior did die in World War II. My dad's brother.
And he didn't say, but he's got a brother that's a master chief in the Navy. He retired 30 years. He's coming next. His name is Mark Evansville. And also he has an aunt because his mother was French and she would come over and visit. So she was a French descent. His mother spoke French. She was a French descent. That was Mr. Evansville. He's a rights graduate. Where'd you go? Hey, you want to call
I'm Jim Pickle from Poseville, Indiana. My grandparents and my parents had a 15-acre truck patch. We actually, our family actually, we fed Evansville. We had peas by the bushel baskets and potatoes by the truckload, and well, we worked our butts off farming peas in Evansville.
What's your name again?
Jim Pickle.
So if you talk to, he said farming was so important to feed the troops, but there's another guy named Mrs. Cummings, her dad is Mr. Metzger. They had farm on the west side. You might know them, but he couldn't go to the service because he's a farmer. If you had a medical problem, also farming, you needed a lot of farming. So that was very important, farming, and they weren't medically disqualified, but we need farming. This is Ernie Payne. He was the president of the Sons of the American Revolution. His wife is right here, and she's in the daughter of the American Revolution. This is Ernie Payne. What you got there?
My father was in the Navy in World War II. I had a grandfather. He worked here in Evansville as a guard at the Cransville plant, and he was stationed in one of those watchtowers that had over the railroad track to try to spot anybody trying to steal anything.
Thank you. He's in the Sons of American Revolution, so that means Sons of American Revolution, his family got here before the Revolutionary War, was part of the Revolutionary War. So that's one of our first wars. We're talking about World War II. Okay, we got somebody over here, not shy. Right, okay, right over here. Okay. You're doing a good job. Keep him on the mic. Got him on him. You with us?
I'm with you.
Stand up. Hey. Okay. Name?
Gary Burnett.
Gary Burnett.
This is a story about the LSD. There, we were in France, overlooking the beach of Normandy, and the tour guide was a Frenchman, and he was telling them all about it. And a friend of ours walked up there and said, "We've got the only operating LSD in the world." The guy turned around and said, Evansville, Indiana. He knew about this LSD, and he was a Frenchman.
Thank you. This young lady, her mother's on my paper route. She lives on Runnymede or Englewood. And her mother's a real jewel, and she's a jewel too. Say your name.
My name is Joyce Prairie, and I don't really have much to say, except one of my uncles flew over the hump.
Wow, got another over the hump. Now, some people know what the hump is. The hump went from India to China in World War II. There was only one pathway from India to China, and it was made in 1937 by hand picks and things like that. So what happened is Japan took over most of China, all the ports. There was only one way to get goods in and out, and that was over the hump, but then they blocked that road. So what was left was the Japanese were just about taking over China. So we saw the importance, so we flew the hump. It was one of the biggest airlifts ever. The other second biggest airlift was in Germany in 1949 when we flew goods to people that were trapped in Germany by the Russians. So this was very important flying up. Now it's about 14 to 18,000 feet, bad weather. There wasn't good weather reports, and it was called Tin Alley. There were so many crashes. So if you crashed in the Himalayas, you weren't getting out of there. The tigers would get you, or the weather would get you, or something would get you. So it was very bad to go down in the hump. Mr. Brinker would talk to me about it. We've got him on YouTube. Mr. Brinker, they flew what's called the C-46 over the hump, and they had tons of barrels of gas in that. Guys up there smoking, throwing cigarettes, and they're, oh my God. Then sir, legally just sold the tank of gas out. But I think they should have been smoking on that trip. Okay, oh, we got a lady back here. She's going to come up front there. She's a right friend. What school?
Boonville High School.
Boonville High, we got a pioneer here. Here's a pioneer.
Hello. Karen Woods. My mother was Mary Jane Hester outside. She lived in Rockport. And when she graduated high school, her mother gave her 50 cents, put her on a traction car, and she came to Evansville. She spent the first night in the Evansville store bathroom because there wasn't any place to sleep. She got a job at Servell. She was a bucker. The riveters would rivet. She was small. She was inside holding the bucker. So she was a bucker, and she worked like that for the rest of the war.
Where did she live? In Evansville.
Well, it was, I'm not sure, but it was the place where all the women lived. It was over there by the Coliseum. Thank you.
Name again?
My name is Karen Woods.
What was your mother's name?
Mary Jane Side.
Okay, what she's saying there, very thank you, Mary Jane, or Miss Woods, but what she's saying is sorry, but what she's saying there is you had 80,000 workers. Donna brought some of that. 80,000 workers came in here and they didn't have a place to stay. So they didn't have a place to stay, so a lot of them would carpool in, and the ENOB, if you go to Hatfield, there's Chips Inn. I'm sure you've been to Chips Inn, but Chips Inn's an old ENOB. It's like a trolley car like down in New Orleans or out San Francisco. We had a ton of those around here. Closed them up in the 50s. So people would come in on those and come in carpooling. You had to get masses of people here. And some people would stay at home and come back. Some people would stay and find places to stay. But you had 80,000 workers. We had 19,000 before the war. So where are you going to put those 61,000 people? That was a social problem. Next, anybody else here? Okay, we got this Mr. McCutcheon. Okay, look over here. Yeah. Take that sign. Not too close. Not there.
Okay. We had a McCutcheon side and we had a Snobble side. McCutcheon side, my grandfather was a contractor, and as soon as they said to build a ship, he went into contracting business for the government at the shipyard. As he stayed there, my grandmother got tired, I guess, of sitting home, so she did some knitting. a lot of knitting. And when you get something knitted, you can take it down to the train station where they have the American Legion, American whatever.
Red Cross.
Red Cross. And whether the soldier was heading north or south, she would give him whatever she had knitted during the time. So that was her contribution. My uncle was in the Army, and he was a firefighter over in Africa. The other was my dad, and he was given the opportunity he could either build a plant out here on the 4-H Center property where they stored ammunition and shipped ammunition out, or else he was going to be drafted. So you know what he did. He got real friendly with the 4-H Center.
That's probably why you're here.
I have two other grandparents. My grandmother on the Snubble side, stayed home. She didn't do anything. So that took care of one person there. I had the grandparent who he had just totally banging his job sometimes, to be honest with you. And then I had an uncle who was a tool and die maker at Whirlpool. Not Whirlpool, man. He ended up at Whirlpool. He started out, I think, at Cedar. Okay, but that's my story. Now, let me tell you.
One thing before you go, those are 4 machines are from Whirlpool, or from Republic Aviation original, and Cedar, I think, is that somebody Cedar? No, yeah, somebody's in the runway, owned by Mr. Ellisford.
Okay, now you're going to be on what I'm talking about.
Sorry. My wife does that all the time.
I don't know, if I see it, I'll stand up and tell you.
Oh, he remembers, back up.
Stand up, Don, you kept listening low level there. My grandmother was selected by a group of employees at the shipyard to christen a ship. I was there when the ship was christened. I can tell you every little detail about it. It was amazing, and that's the payment she got.
What was her name?
Her name, Rita McCutcheon.
Rita McCutcheon, that's rare. Only 167 christenings, so it's very rare to get to be a Christian and human witness. That's just Susan. Okay. Any other? Here we got one lady in the corner here. Thank you. This lady's going to say her name.
I'm Judy Glazer, and my dad was in World War II. My uncle was also in Paris and got injured. But the bad thing is Dad never talked about anything. And when he passed away, we went through things, and Mom was gone. We found, some memorabilia, but they never talked about anything. And then we get these certificates now. And I sent one to my cousin, because, his dad was in it. And it's a shame that all of that got lost. If we could have, heard any of their stories. I had an uncle also that was in the Korean War too.
All of you probably got some statements on that, but I noticed that people up until their 80s a lot of times wouldn't talk about the war. And then, my dad opened up a little bit then, but I noticed people mid-80s into their 90s will open up about their experiences. But that's just anecdotal. I don't know what really, I've never read about that. Any other statements here? We've got one more from Mr. McCutcheon. One more, Mr. McCutcheon. Thank you.
The grandfather I told you didn't like to work too hard was an employee. That's a question, not Sterling Brewer.
He was a smart man. He worked at Sterling Brewer. My dad worked there too, but you got paid about, I think, a couple cases a week, and they had beer breaks, and beer breaks, by the time the end of the day, I don't know how much work you got done. Okay, this is, this lady's catching me. Oh my gosh. Okay, we have a sign-up sheet Okay, a sign-up sheet is right here. My wife's going to send it down the aisle, so she doesn't take all these phone calls. But what this sign-up sheet, this young lady has caught this on me. We have two things that night, if you want to do that day. This is the sign-up sheet to get your free lunch on October 7th, and we have James Zumwalt, Lieutenant Colonel, talking here. That's the free lunch. Now, if you want to come to the evening one, we will have another sign-up sheet outside. And I like your emails on here because then we can send you other things that we have. I see just phone numbers and somebody puts some emails. The emails would help us to send other information out.
Mark, is the topic different?
Okay, yes. The topic at noontime is Admiral James Zumwalt talking about his father and the Navy in World War II. It's really talking about, not World War II, 1970 to 74. He lived in the Naval Observatory House, in front of the Naval Observatory. That's where your time is done right now. It's called a time clock right behind the Naval Observatory. That was then taken over by the Vice President. The Vice President lives in a house, on Massachusetts, in a big white house, and Happy was married to Nelson. They lived there. They were the first Vice President to live there. But he's going to talk about that guy at noontime. If you want to come to the evening talk, you can tell it's going to be a safe place, but you got to pay for that. And that's going to be at 6 o'clock, and he's going to talk about Vietnam. And this man interrogated over 50 Vietnamese, and so he's going to talk from the Vietnamese perspective. He's written 3 books, talked a lot about them. So that's James Zumwalt in the evening. So if you want to sign up to that, go to the front desk and say, I want the evening sign up, and then you're going to be charged when you come to the door. Okay.
Mark?
Yes, my wife has a question. I missed something
Did
else.
his dad drop the Agent Orange?
What?
Did his father drop the Agent Orange?
Well, I didn't want to steal the thunder, but I was a doctor at the National Cancer Institute in 1980. And he came into that, he had eyebrows all the way to his forehead. I think they were connected to his hair. But anyway, I mean, he's a nice guy. He was a short guy, but remember, he was the youngest admiral ever made, but he was there with his son. It's not this son, but that son died in 1988. Admiral Zumwalt was part of the Agent Orange, and we use Agent Orange in Vietnam. Part of the people got lymphoma, and his son got lymphoma. So here's a dad that was part of the process of pushing the buttons, and here's his kid. He had to watch his kid die in 1988. They wrote up This Boy's Coming, has written a book about that. So it's a tragedy where the dad was doing something, thinking helping the nation. His own son was out there, got exposed to this Agent Orange. Any other questions or questions that we've forgotten? Don, anything else? Okay. Go ahead.
Second thing, Chairman, we're talking about LST 325 being the last SWIRCA LST in the world today. 7,000 ships took part in the Normandy invasion. This is the last one. That was the working ship part of the Normandy invasion. 4 public high schools in Evansville during World War II, right? Bossy, Central. What was it called? Lincoln. No longer here. It was Lincoln. Yeah.
And what she said, you might not remember, but the first part where there's 7,000 ships in invasion Normandy, and there's one left in the world, and that's our LST now. Non-one ship. Thank you very much. Peru, we've got what's called Golden's around. That sign up sheet, if you can't find, the sign up sheet, you can find my wife. She's that pretty lady right there walking. So she'll take care of you. Thank you for coming. We'll see you a month from now.